So I'm so freaking excited to have you on because, as you know, Chloe had mentioned, we've been doing this series on the 8 limbs of yoga and specifically how teachers can really work to incorporate all of the limbs into the student experience so that I have noticed from your work also that there is obviously this like huge emphasis on the asana. So
Mhm.
we actually in this series we actually skipped right over the asana because there is so much content on it and we're kind of diving into all of the other parts of it. So now we're at meditation and samadhi. So I am so freaking excited to have you on and hear what you have to say. And I read your bio and I follow you on your social medias. So I'm really, really stoked.
Awesome.
First, can you just tell the listeners a little bit about you and your background, your experience, anything that you want to share?
Sure. So my name is Ishar. I've been meditating for a little over 10 years now. I started out just doing it by myself, been watching a couple of YouTube videos, and I'm like, oh, let me try this out. And I was really amazed at the effects that it had in my life. So that naturally had me explore the topic a bit more. So this is where I started to naturally go into yoga, started to learn how to get myself into different asanas and poses that will allow me to sit for longer periods of time. Because at the time I was, doing about like an hour or two a day, and I wanted to really sit for longer periods of time. And as you know, that the asanas will help you sit for longer periods of time. So that's when I explored the asanas and yoga a bit more, got my teaching certification. And in the meantime, I also explored the Zen Buddhism route. And I really was appealed by what appealed me to it was the simplicity behind it. So I was able to really deepen my meditation practice a bit more and study under different teachers of different Zen lineages to provide a holistic approach to my teachings, which I now teach for different students at Black Swan and online as well.
That's awesome.
Thanks.
Yes. So you do both in person in studio and you do online.
Yes, I teach yoga classes in person, and then I also make meditations, and I also talk about different topics of meditation, and also law of attraction, different concepts related to that as well. So a bit of both.
Cool. So now I'm curious, do you, when you're teaching at Black Swan, for example, are the classes strictly meditation? Are you incorporating inevitably some asana in there? Is this a yoga class with a heavy emphasis on meditation? How exactly do you approach it?
So the way I approach it is that the poses are meant to help you deepen your spiritual practice. So I look at it in that lens first, because obviously in Black Swan, there are teachers with different focuses and emphasis. So for example, you go to a power yoga class and the emphasis there is to get more of a physical nature of that workout in. My approach is more meditative. So I do offer different poses and different variations of the pose. So it's not like it's going to be a easy class where you just sit there, but it is more mindful. So I do offer variations where you can go deeper into the pose, but while doing that, you want to keep that meditative focus. And in every class, I do incorporate meditation in all my classes. And that's obviously to help you get deeper into your practice and be able to sit and actually experience the stillness, the peace, the serenity that comes from the practice. So a lot of students that come into my class are, I wouldn't say amazed, but yes, amazed because they're so used to taking more of that physical route of yoga. And when they come to my classes, they feel it more on the energetic body. So they feel a lot different from my classes.
So, how then do, I mean, you kind of like perfectly already said it, but how then do we as teachers in the community settings work
Mhm.
to bring meditation into the asana, into the classes towards the beginning or the end, or however you disperse it in? How can we then begin to incorporate that limb into our practice of teaching?
Yeah, and I think as teachers, it's first and foremost, it's important to have your own practice. So whatever that is, and then be able to teach on it, because naturally you're students will have questions. But in terms of teaching it in a class, I like to do it first in the beginning to have a short centering. And this is where the student can finally check in before just jumping blindly into class. So this is the time to get centered, to notice your current quality of breath, attention, and all of that. And then go about your poses. So I typically incorporate some standing poses. And then after that, incorporate seated poses. I think that a lot of teachers nowadays miss out on the seated poses. But if you really look into the meaning of asana, it just means seat. So like you probably mentioned in the previous talk, so the whole point of the asana is to help you sit. So this is why you probably need that seated poses. And it's through that seated poses that it's a natural transition over to the meditation, the seated meditation. And this is where I'll incorporate at least 10 minutes of seated meditation for every class. And then after Shavasana, this is the time where I come back to that check-in. So remember, we had the check-in in the beginning of class and at the end of class. So this is where the student can now see the powers and actual effects that this practice has had because they've done the check-in. They know how they felt at the beginning, and now they know how they feel at the end. So this is a holistic process where they can continuously check in. That's how I typically like to structure my meditation in the class.
Okay, so seated, centering in the beginning. And then we move through perhaps a little bit more dynamic standing series.
Yes.
And then we come back down to the seat. And you offer at least 10 minutes of meditation here.
It is.
And then pull people back out, have them recheck in, have some introspective centering time at the end.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
And as
And
a side note, I also make my Shavasana about 7 minutes, 6 to 7 minutes. So at least 10% of the class.
so important. How do you notice that your students respond to that? For those people who are used to, going through to a really intense class and then having, for example, a 2-minute shavasana, how do they then respond to your practice when you offer up, the 10 minutes of meditation? You said at least 7 minutes of shavasana.
Yeah. So the types of students I'll have, if I'm going to categorize them right in two categories. The first is the ones that are very like into the physical aspect of yoga. So they like to go to these very fast-paced classes, the power classes. They also have an active background in working out. So they're coming to the class looking for that peak physical experience. And in that sense, my class does offer the slower variations of each pose, but I do something like I can incorporate the deep aspects of the pose and get them deeper. So, they'll feel happy because they've done something that will satisfy that need of physicality, even though they're moving very slowly and very mindfully. I can show them like some crazy deep variations. So they're happy. And they also get to experience the spiritual side or inner introspective side that is missing from those classes. And then for the other students, the students that have a more chilled approach, they have a more easygoing nature, and they like more exploring their inner nature, they'll obviously find benefit of that because they can now have that period of seated meditation, and they can also try and explore the asanas as well. So for both types of students, they get the holistic experience, but more importantly, they explore that spiritual aspect, and they feel it more inside. So it's more of that uplifting feeling that they have after class rather than feeling stressed out or their heart is beating faster after class than before class, which I don't agree with. So now they're nice and relaxed, and you can see it in their faces and demeanor and how they conduct themselves.
Yeah, it makes it into more of a transformative spiritual practice rather than just the workout,
Yeah.
which I love. I have 2 questions for you. So you can answer whichever one you want first. So, one, do you think that all yoga teachers could and should could and or should offer meditation in their practices? And then, secondly, can you share with us some of the benefits? I saw from some of your posts that you have a good amount of like scientific research, evidence-based information that is really displaying and exposing how beneficial meditation is for the general public. So whichever one you want first, go ahead.
I'll answer more on the second one, but but touching upon the first question you asked, I think that every teacher should teach meditation because that's, going back to the original roots of yoga, where they had a strong meditation practice, and that's something that's needed. And it's also not only good for the students, but also the teacher themselves, because they have an opportunity to go deeper into their own practice. And since meditation is so inwardly focused, it can be hard for a teacher that's newer to see the benefits of it, of teaching it, but it really comes out in the person's actions and through how they interact with their class. So meditation speaks through their body. So that's something that's very interesting, because all the transmission that you're going to be giving out comes through the practice itself. So your students will intuitively know if you haven't practiced or you have, because it speaks in the way that you communicate, whether you're stressed out or whether you're freaking out, because you want to be the mirror for your students and actually show them a good example of what calm looks like, what gratefulness looks like, what joy looks like. And it starts with your own practice. So I think obviously that should be incorporated. And then touching upon the second one, you asked a bit more about the benefits, was that right? Yeah, so there obviously are tons. One thing I can think about is the breath, your respiration rate slowing down. So the average person breathes about 12 breaths in a minute. And you'll find that in meditators, so people who have like a couple years in, they breathe about like 5 to 6 times a minute. And then experienced meditators can even start to breathe like only once per minute. So, and you also notice this in your own practice. If you go really deep into meditation, you actually forget that your body's here, and you slow down your breath a lot. So that has some effects on your body. So you're a bit more calm. You have a slower metabolism rate, so everything's a bit more chilled and mellowed down. And then in terms of the brain waves, in most people, when they operate and they're going about from one task to the next, they're in a high beta wave state. So this is like the fast waves. And this, in higher beta wave states, this produces feelings of anxiety and stress. But in optimal levels, it's still more of that active energy. And what meditation does is that during your seat, you have more of that alpha brain waves, which is more relaxed. So you get into that quality of being more relaxed. And then you also touch upon the theta wave states, which is more of that the creation intuitive side, and it's more like a slower pace than that. So it's also more relaxation. And what is interesting is that these effects over time, the more you practice, will spill over into daily life and actually becomes a habitual way of being. So in experienced meditators, they actually have more theta waves and alpha waves emitting naturally when they're not meditating compared to just sitting on their cushion. So that's very cool if you think about it, because you can actually change the entire way you interact with the world, your mind state, and all that as well. So that's just yeah.
So how does that then, so if I am now running, so for me in my brain, I go to the central nervous system, like alpha alpha waves, you are in your sympathetic nervous system. And then
The beta wave, yeah.
okay, oh yes, excuse me. So the beta waves, you're in the sympathetic nervous system, and then the alpha waves, you're more in the parasympathetic nervous system.
Yes.
So how does that affect your tasking? So if I'm going, if I'm in the beta and I'm going like task, 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 and I have a million tasks on my mind, how then is it when I transition into this other wave? How does that affect how I approach a task, how I approach like my
So
conversation with my partner?
So what's very interesting is that a lot of different meditation teachers have always said, like, one thing in common is that any worthwhile meditation practice builds the quality of concentration and also calm. So if you think about concentration, right, the last limb of dharana, where you're focusing on one point over and over again, over time, although you're just thinking about it in your meditation cushion, the effects will extend outside of that. So meditation can actually make you better at math, doing taxes, working out, any life activity, because you're able to focus your attention single-handedly, and you can get more done at a faster rate with less effort. So that's where the concentration part comes in. And then in terms of calm, that's the second bonus that meditation develops, is that if you're able to do the activity in a calm manner, you're able to approach it in a manner where you can accomplish different things and you're not freaking out. That also is conducive to work. You can get more things done. And meditation also reduces your stress levels. So you're approaching all these tasks in a calm manner and in an efficient manner. So you can start to see how when these things are done single-mindedly with enough focus and you're not distracted, you can not only get your work done, but you can do it in a better way, in a better fashion.
It makes so much sense. I mean, everything that we do on the mat is, to me, oftentimes a microcosm of greater events that are occurring, how we interact with the greater events, greater context around us.
Exactly. And there's a great quote that goes, how you do one thing is how you do everything.
Yes,
So
I
it's
totally agree. uh, what else? Is there anything else you want to add on to the meditation portion that you really think that yoga teachers should know? I have so many questions for you.
yeah, yeah. So, so just more so addressing teachers, would you say more on so like how to teach it or questions about their own practice?
I
Yeah.
well, that's a really good one because you made the point. That's a great question that our own practice will directly affect how we teach and how we show up for our students. So it's almost kind of hard to separate the two, right?
So, okay, so let me, you mentioned that. So let me go up on that. So I think what, as a teacher also, you can find your own unique style. So as you know, I obviously like prefer the Zen style of meditation where it's stillness and emptiness, and that's typically how I am personality wise and how I teach. But if you're a bit more energetic, you like to flow, there's also styles as well. So I forget who said this, but I think it was Osho did a talk, obviously in his life decades ago, but he had said that there was a story of two different enlightened masters. So one of them experienced enlightenment through sitting like kind of like the Buddha, where they sat for 40 days and 40 nights and didn't move at all and was just stoic in that aspect. And then there was a Sufi. So and the Sufis they have like the whirlwind dervishes where they dance and they explore they get in touch with the meditative aspect through movement. So this one particular master started dancing for 40 days and 40 nights, and on the 40th day, he like collapsed through ecstasy. So that was like another path because it's still incorporating a lot of the same aspects of concentration and bringing that mindfulness, but it came through a different aspect through flow. And you see that immense focus on that flow that we came to the same objective. So it's all about finding the style that resonates with you. And one thing uh, I like to say is that if you want to learn a particular style, uh, look at the masters or teachers that actually teach that style and just ask yourself, would I like to have that person's qualities? Because you can probably see that if you practice in the same style as them, you'll probably end up taking those qualities on. So you can start to think holistically and objectively, what types of qualities do I want to develop for myself? What types of teachers inspire me? And study where they came from and what background did they learn under. You can start to take the same steps and follow in that footsteps.
That's beautiful. I love
I went on a
that.
tangent.
Yeah. No, I think that that is really truly applicable. You have this one meditation that has really resonated with you. And so that is how you practice, that is how you teach it. And there are different avenues. There's different avenues for teachers to practice and also for them to inspire and motivate their practice of teaching yoga also. Cool. Um, okay. Another question I have is is there anything else that you want to say? I want to hit on if there's pertinent information that you have that you really want to get out to the listeners.
Sure. So I mean, I had like a couple of things like written down just about in terms of like the practice and how to get to Dhyan from Dharana, but I can get there once
Yeah.
comes to that point.
No, go for it. Go for it.
Oh, okay, got it. So
Mhm.
so in your previous talks you went over Dharana, correct? Like concentration.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Okay, awesome. So just as like a quick recap, so we'll be focusing on one singular object repeatedly, right? And according to the Anapanasati, which is that Buddhism text, there are different objects you can focus on, and it really could depend on. It could be, for example, like your breath could be one. You can focus on a mantra. You can focus on an object, and whatever object you focus on will impart certain qualities. So if you look at you meditate upon like a clay object, you'll get that feeling of dullness, but that's pretty good if you're kind of anxious already. Or I think it's kind of morbid, but you can focus on a corpse. They had that in the olden days, thousands of years ago. If you're trying to work on being not attached to the body, so that's one example. But what the old texts recommend is just focus on the breath because that's the most neutral and it won't produce any kind of effects that go one way and it's suitable for everyone. So that's why typically in any yoga class you go for the breath because it doesn't produce any um, particular side effects. So once you focus on your object, in this example breath, you'll just focus, you'll start to narrow your attention down on one point. So that's, you'll notice that once your attention becomes sharpened, so does your mind. Because if you start to focus on everything around you in an open awareness, which is a kind of like more of a later stage, but if you try that earlier, you'll tend to get distracted. So that's where you just start to get distracted by anything that comes your way. So what you want to do is focus on one particular point, narrow your attention, and keep coming back to it. So now, once you've done that over and over again, you become, you start to notice the object at first. So you're separate from the object. So you're noticing the breath. You're noticing, okay, I'm a person that's seeing my breath come in and out. And then eventually you start to merge with your breath itself. So this is a gradual stage of your concentration developing and deepening. So now you merge with the sensations associated with the breath. And then you start to go deeper and deeper where you become what is called one with your breath or one with the object. So this is where the stages of dhyan start to enter. So instead of now focusing like very sharply and putting all your attention in it, you start to now do the opposite. So now you're stepping back a bit. So now you're just noticing it as if it was like a stream just coming by. So this is dhyan is actually marked by effortless attention. So this is at a stage where you've done the groundwork of concentration, and now you can actually sit back. So this is where you effortlessly notice everything around you, and there's no separation between yourself and everything around you. So you, in essence, merge with that. And now from here, the longer you stay in the state of just natural observing, this is where you start to enter samadhi. So this is the union. So this is where now you can start to understand like the ancient texts where it may have seemed very like cryptic before and esoteric. This starts to make sense now if you're in that state because now there literally is no separation between what you call your body and everything around you. So you are the awareness that notices that object, and then you become that object and everything around you as well. So then you enter samadhi, right? And typically, this is achieved through those prior stages, right? Like that we mentioned earlier, like the niyam, your focus on asanas and all that, right? So you do the groundwork. But there are people that naturally just stumble upon this where they experience a lot of that awakening just naturally. That could happen through just different factors. Some people could it just happens in nature, could take drugs, whatever it is. Um, and what happens is that they will experience this nice state of samadhi, but what happens is if they haven't done the groundwork of concentration, they tend to lose that state. So this is why you'll notice that if people go to meditation retreats with a guru, right, and the guru will tell that person like an answer, and they get them to experience a certain state. Give me one sec. Experience a certain state, and then they lose it the next day. So they experience all this bliss and it goes away. This is because they haven't develop the concentration. So the concentration is what keeps and holds everything in balance and in state. So you get to drop into those states more and more. So the more you practice and the more you stay in the states of Dhyana and Samadhi, naturally the space starts to, the gap starts to widen, and there you'll start to rest in that more often. So basically, Samadhi and meditation becomes a part of your being. And let me know if I've gone too far and rambled a bit too much.
No, I'm following you and I love it. And it's so funny. I knew this was going to happen. I had a question to ask you and you answered it when you were just kind of rolling organically, which I love. But when you said widening the gap, so when you say widening the gap, are you referring to like the gap which is filled with your meditative state and your state of samadhi, or the gap in between the times in which you achieve it? When you say the widening gap, what do you refer to?
Oh yeah, so the gap, I would describe it as, let's say you have your identification with you, like your ego mind, different things around you, different thoughts, right? You have all that. And then through the meditation or periods of silence and solitude, you experience this gap where, or you're also experiencing this in a deep meditation where you lose that concept, right? So you lose that concept of your mind, your body, and everything around you. So there's like just what we call space. You can call it awareness, you can call it God. There's different names for that, right? Just like this spaciousness that you experience. So you experience that for a bit, and then your thoughts come back and your different associations come back, and then you're back in like in reality, right? And then you meditate again and you experience the space, and then you're back again. So essentially over time, the more you meditate and abide in that just this effortless space, the the more you'll experience this gap, and it'll start to become where the space becomes your default, if you will, and then you will just have little thoughts and different things sprinkled upon that. So you're kind of flipping that whole paradigm where before you were completely immersed in this reality and everything around you, and you kind of experience space here and there when you're like sleeping or meditating here and there. But eventually it flips where the space becomes your default and all your actions come from that place.
Okay, that makes sense. So if we are working actively and consistently with students to have them be able to, you know, concentrate and practice Dharna and then hopefully into Dhyana, you think that it's possible then to be able to help facilitate students into states of samadhi during like community classes or during yoga?
So that's difficult because if you're going to be honest, when I teach the meditation, a lot of them can't even sit for 5 minutes straight. So so you kind of have to work with where you are, because if you try to teach a student like, okay, focus on one point and just be there straight for an hour straight, if anything, they'll just get frustrated, or they'll get bored. So for students that are just like brand new and they've never meditated before, the focus is actually just to get them on their cushion and meditate. It doesn't matter if it's awful or if they had like a bad there's no such thing as bad meditation session, but let's just say subjectively they feel like they did a bad job. That's fine, because the objective is just to get them on their cushion and meditate. And then from there, try to coach them into being able to sit just for a couple of minutes, and they'll maybe notice, okay, my thoughts come back. And all they're going to do is just focus on, okay, bring your attention back to your breath or some other focus. And then if you get distracted, you just bring it back again. So you're just baby stepping the process. And eventually, if they're a bit more advanced and they want to learn more, then they can start to branch out and perhaps take some other forms like the meditation like Zen, which is what I like, or they can explore some other styles. And this is where they can start to deepen. But I definitely recommend for most students that are very new to meditation and probably don't have practiced more than like half an hour of meditation at a time, then it's better to kind of manage their expectations and start off very slow, so this way they don't get frustrated and give up and say, oh, this is too hard, I can't do this.
Yeah. Yes. Don't promise your students that you're going to bring them into samadhi.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yes, I loved what so the question I was going to ask you was, can you kind of break down, which you answered beautifully, Dharna versus Dhyana? Because to me, sometimes it feels as though the lines can get a little blurred. And it almost, I mean, now that you say it, it is pretty seamless one into the other.
Yeah, and so dharana is a concentration. So there's like a lot of like energy and like emphasis involved.
Mm-hmm.
So you're constantly bringing your attention back. So you can mark it as like a lot of like expenditure, if you will. But then dhyan is effortless. So you're kind of taking that back. But I guess here where the confusion lies with a lot of people is that dhyan also looks like a beginner meditator, not like kind of just putting their attention everywhere, because it's still the kind of the state of having an open awareness. But the difference is that the beginner will be caught to a lot of different vrittis or thought patterns or different associations, so they lose their attention. But for the experienced meditator, dhyan just looks like effortless, but you're not getting distracted by your own mind. So it's just a natural absorption. And this is also why in typically if you go to like a Zen retreat, after you've done a solid meditation for a couple hours, you'll also incorporate slow walking, like a walking meditation. You'll also do some light activities like raking leaves or washing dishes. So you start to bring that meditative awareness in all your activities. So you start to baby step that process of taking that attention that you developed in meditation and applying it to all your activities. And then what happens when you do that is that you'll find it easier and easier to get into a state of dhyan or meditation in your everyday life. So that's a training ground for your daily life. So that's actually the reason why in Zen meditation we incorporate other activities other than sitting.
That makes a lot of sense.
And you can even do it. I mean, I wouldn't recommend doing it when you're driving, but you can also do it when you're driving, eating food, like just different activities. Try to see if you can both anchor yourself and just notice your inner awareness while doing other activities.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, don't do it in something that requires a lot of your attention or something that's very complex. Then you lose it and get frustrated. But if you can do something very easy, um, even just watching TV, you just look at the screen. You're like seeing the screen in front of you, but you're also noticing inner awareness, the inner spaciousness within you, and you're just observing. And then maybe you lose it. Okay, all good. Go downstairs, get a glass of water. You start to notice your feet press against the floor as you walk down. Just natural noticing. Open the fridge door, whatever the case is. Incorporate that quality of just natural noticing in all your activities.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And when you say it, it sounds very non-intimidating.
Yeah.
So, what else do you have to add on, say, for samadhi? Samadhi for me has been probably the most abstract or
Mhm.
intangible kind of limb of the eight limbs.
Mhm.
And, that seems to be the actual cycle of it. Very tangible, accessible, less abstract, and then it kind of seems to me to get more abstract. And so I want you to explain to me samadhi.
Sure. And then it gets like even more. So, as you probably noticed, like the limbs, right? They start from something that's very tangible in front of you, getting more subtle, right? Because you start off with the ethics and how do you conduct yourself in the world, and then you're like asanas, which is physical body. And then you draw your senses inwards, all that stuff. So you start to gradually become more and more subtle into the inner body, and then eventually with samadhi, that becomes even more subtle, right? That's why it becomes a little abstract, and then even within that, there's like different stages within samadhi. So it goes even deeper than that. So in regards to that, so in samadhi, you'll first notice it in your meditation sitting. So like I mentioned, if you've done like a long retreat or something where you've done a meditation retreat for a bit of time where you can actually concentrate your mind, you can get into that place of absorption, let go, and abide in that. You start to naturally, over time, you'll get into that space of samadhi. And then what happens is that you lose that. So you'll finish that retreat or that sitting, and you go about your day, you're in like your car, you drive home, you're caught in traffic, you lost that calm that you developed. But then what happens is that the more you experience, the more you practice, and the more that you experience the state of samadhi, it starts to become a part of you. So, and there's also a really good book, actually, I have it in front of me, called Altered Traits. And this is where they actually study different meditators. So people who have like ranging from like novice meditators to people who have over 10,000 hours of meditation, and even beyond that, even 70,000 hours, like expert meditators. And what they've found is that their brains actually resemble a lot of the qualities described in the ancient texts. So the ancient texts talk about like wide open awareness and spaciousness and no self-referencing and all that, and all these like texts. And you'll find that over time, the more you practice, it becomes a default way of being. So actually, the book is called Altered Traits by Daniel Goleman. And the reason why it's called Altered Traits is because in the beginning, it's just like a state. So you start to meditate, you become a state of being calm and tranquil, but it goes away. And then the more you practice, it becomes like like a state by trait or something like that, where you'll experience it in your meditation practice and for a bit more. So you'll start to get a taste of that quality, but then you can't keep it. So this is where you'll experience that period of samadhi, where you get that spaciousness. And a lot of people will experience that, students will experience that in a meditation retreat, but then they lose it after a day or two. So then the more you practice, then you get to taste of it more, and then it becomes a part of your being. So this is ultimately where you want to get to, where that practice of the quality of meditation becomes who you are. So that's, and there's different texts that go into that, like Zen and all that. The ox herding example. There's like different stories that go into that of the different stages.
You said the ox herding example?
Yeah, it's the 8 stages of the 8 stages or something like. I have to like look back up. I think 8 stages of ox herding. It's like an old like Zen story of a person like who is looking for his ox, which represents the mind, and it goes about this whole story of how he um, is able to like first quieten the get a hold of his mind, the monkey mind, and then is
Mm-hmm.
able to tame it, and then experiences states of enlightenment, becomes one with everything, and experiences emptiness. But then he needs to experience form, and then he experiences form and emptiness, and there's like different stages to that too. But I won't go too much into that. But yes, there are different stages within that samadhi. But what I'm trying to say is that the quality of consistent practice will allow it for it to become a habitual state, a trait.
Wow. That's amazing. So, I mean, us as teachers, one of the best things we can do for our students is to, well, first, let me start off by saying a lot of our students, as far as I have noticed, come to the practice for the physical benefits,
Mm-hmm.
and then end up staying for some of the deeper levels that you find in this practice that make it unique and different. And so, one of the best things we can do as far as samadhi, no, we're not going to bring our students into samadhi in like a 60-minute, community yoga class or even a 2 hour or 3 hour one, perhaps. But you can begin to point them in the right directions by incorporating some of these earlier limbs into the practice with consistency.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the more important thing is like they'll also get that inspiration and motivation to keep going too, because they have touched upon the surface, but it actually goes much deeper. And unfortunately, what happens with many yoga studios is that they overemphasize the poses and they just leave it at that. So that's all it is. So I hope that if more teachers start to incorporate the meditation aspects and going deeper into it, that the students will have a deeper understanding and deeper practice, which not only affects that 1 hour of their life, but also has an impact in all aspects of their life. So it's a completely holistic experience in every sense of the word.
Yes, I love that. And I wrote down the book name by Daniel Goldman, you said?
Daniel Goleman, yeah.
Goldman. Okay, so I wrote that down. So that'll be linked into the show notes with your contact information. And we'll have a link to your YouTube because I would love to, for the listeners, if they're curious, to be able to link in. Maybe I can even put it into the show notes, like one of your meditations.
Sounds good. I do have a few on there, so I can send you one.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and you can send me one or I can choose one and link it in. So for those of you listeners who are curious, we will definitely have some of that available to you along with all of your info. And is there anything else you want to end with? Like if you could, give some advice to the listeners out there, the teachers, what would you have them know?
So meditation is just like a truly amazing practice, and it gets more deep the more you go. So it's one of those things where it'll always provide you benefits at every step of the way. If there's someone who's brand new, just looking to, I need a break from work, my 9 to 5 job is killing me. Okay, I can just meditate for 20 minutes and experience some peace of mind. So not everyone has to be this like yogi or anything like that, but you can, if you just like need a break from work, you can do that. If you like to go deeper, you can also do that and experience some calm. So there's really no cap, if you will, of meditation, and it's something that enriches, like I mentioned, not only your spiritual aspect, but it also affects everything in your life. And I think that's just truly amazing because it can make you a better friend, make you a better parent, better anything really. So it affects all areas in your life, and at the end of the day, who doesn't want that? So it's a practice that
Yeah.
keeps giving, and it will definitely enrich your life.
That's beautiful. I am sure. I mean, if all of our listeners don't already have a meditation practice established, I'm sure they are feeling incredibly inspired to, and we'll definitely have some of your all of your links in. Thank you so, so, so much. I love being able to interview people but I particularly love being able to interview people who I've had the pleasure of knowing and meeting or have gone to your class, and I'm really excited to come to one of your classes.
Oh, love to have you, and thank you again for having me. This is awesome.
Yes. Once again,
And
anything else you want to add?
oh, I I probably have a lot, but we'll save that for another time. But
Are
feel
you
free.
sure? I mean, bring it in.
I mean, there's a lot I wrote down, but
I'm all ears. Is there some more things that you want to say? Just a couple. I mean, we'll take it. You are a wealth of knowledge. I just don't
okay.
want to take
So
up I don't want to take up too much of your
oh, I'm doing
time.
good. I'm doing good. So
Okay, cool. Then keep it coming.
so something I also noticed with any kind of like meditation practice, right, is that like I mentioned, you want to develop concentration and calm, right? So being very peaceful. You'll experience concentration dharana. And as a result of focusing on dharana, you'll also experience calm, which will allow you to provide that motivation. So when a lot of people are like, I don't feel motivated to meditate, right? Just know that the more you practice, the more you work on that limb of concentration.
Mm-hmm.
When you are able to really focus in on your attention, you'll start to feel pleasurable feelings. And then the more you focus on that calm, that'll spur you to put more attention in. So it's a positive feedback loop of both concentration and calm, and that actually builds over to absorption and jhana. So this would be a quality of tranquility that you develop. But then also the next component that you want to incorporate is a form of vipassana or clarity. So vipassana, basically, if you look at the root, V means two, the first two letters, and pasana means to break apart or see through. So this is an aspect where you're taking a bigger concept and you're breaking it down. So in practical terms, you are gaining that quality of self-understanding because you can start to break through your patterns, the habitual thinking, say you're experiencing anger, for example, right? If you're applying that method of clarity, you can take that heavy feeling of anger, which is consuming your entire body, and breaking it down. Okay, I feel this chest area, or I feel this in my head area. And then you start to go deeper into the sensation. Where does this feeling arise in my chest? Does it stop at my shoulders? Does it go down to my legs? Where does it start and stop? So you start to really go deeper into the components. And holistically over time, the more you practice this insight, the more you'll see where you're unenlightening yourself, so to speak, or where you're getting stuck to different things, and you can release that. So this is also a great way for you to release any like past baggages, and also feel more free, and also gain self-understanding. So this aspect is also very important in meditation and beyond, which a lot of people neglect. So it's easy to get caught in a place of just focusing on good feelings of meditation. But if you don't actually like push through the difficult times and also um, dissect and see where you're holding on to different things and what's stopping you, you don't really grow in your practice. So you stay in the same level for a couple of years. So this is also something a qualified teacher would be able to show you through, and because they've been through that. So that's also another aspect. So again, it's just like concentration, calm, definitely that important aspect of clarity.
And so I like what you said as far as not just dropping in and focusing your awareness to the quote unquote like good, positive, good vibe feelings, but also noticing, I have a pit of anxiety in my stomach,
Mhm.
and where is that extending to, and how is it making my entire body respond?
Exactly. And then what also happens is that you get that quality of detachment, right? Where you'll notice, you'll kind of peel yourself away. You become that observer of noticing everything around you, and then you'll start to notice that things like anxiety don't hit you as hard. It might still be there, but it won't hit you as hard. Different self-defeating concepts won't hit as hard. So you develop the quality of equanimity, and touching upon equanimity, you are being okay with the good experiences because you're obviously sitting there in that meditation. And when you focus on the good sensations, they amplify. So you get to experience the positive aspects of meditation at a higher level. But then what happens is that your negative experiences lose that punch. So essentially, what happens is that you're training yourself to be okay with the discomfort. And especially in like Zen centers, you go there, like meditate for like 6 hours in a day or like 10 hours a day. They're very big on posture and sitting still. So even if your ankle hurts, you just sit there, you sit through it. And you might be like, oh, it sucks, I'm gonna move, and you're like angry at everyone. But it's actually teaching you a valuable life lesson. And that is to be okay with the discomfort and actually sit through it. And you will develop that quality of equanimity where you're sitting through it, and that actually affects all areas of your life. So when you're out and about and like someone cuts you off in traffic or someone's being mean to you, you're actually okay with that. And you're actually developing that trainable quality that helps you in life. So that's the quality of equanimity. And your baseline level, right? Because your negative aspects of life that you're experiencing don't hit you as hard and the positives go up, your trajectory goes upwards. So your overall baseline of happiness goes up.
That's so interesting. And also, I have definitely experienced this firsthand. When I started my meditation practice and having it more consistent in my life, I had people asking me why, and I didn't have a word or a label for it, but I could say that I didn't get as angry when I got at the red light. Like, first off, why am I even getting angry at a red light anyways? It's or getting angry when like annoyed if someone honks at me or my phone rings when I don't want it to or whatnot, but just like noticing that I was not as bothered to it. And so it's really nice to actually have that word to it.
Exactly. And also the point of meditation is not to suppress these emotions too. One thing you'll notice is that a lot of the Zen masters, they actually are very spontaneous. So if they're angry, they're angry. They'll look you up there. They're like, close the door, don't be loud. And they're like, blah, they're still expressing all that emotion, right? And they're not being like, oh, I shouldn't be angry. So they're still like being able to express. But what happens is that it loses their sticky quality. So they're not holding on to it, right? So this is what the practice of meditation entails, where you notice, you experience that emotion fully, but it doesn't have to grasp anything. And you experience that freedom.
That's awesome. I just had a bunch of family in town. Well, it my older sister was in town, and um they, with families and in-laws, there's always like interesting relationships and dynamics, and she has a particular uh relationship with another person who was formerly very irritable or easily triggered. And Ashley said, my sister said on this trip that it was like worlds different. And she said that she found out on this trip that also the woman had picked up a very serious meditation practice. And Ashley had no
Very cool.
idea about the practice, but she knew there was something that was like significantly different about this person.
Yeah, it's amazing. And then what's crazy is like when you start meditating, you you think that you're not changing because it's kind of like holding a mirror up to yourself. Like you see yourself every day, so you don't notice the changes. But you'll notice that first from other people. They're like, "Oh, you seem more calm. You seem more peaceful." And that's also always great to hear because you think that the practice is not changing you because your concept of yourself seems to be like very still. But actually, other people are reflecting that quality back at you, and they're so calm and all that. So it's always inspiring, you know.
Yes, absolutely. Hmm. What else do you have for me, Ishar?
I think that's pretty much it for what I. Yeah, I think the rest.
That was so awesome.
Yeah, that was awesome. I like being on here. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time and your energy and meeting up with me so late. I'm a pretty early sleeper. I go to bed at
Oh,
like
you are.
between 9:30 and 10:30. Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's not bad. That's not bad.
Yeah. So thank you so much. What time are you teaching at Black Swan?
Yes, I'll be teaching. Next class will be on Wednesday. And that'll be the candlelit class at Westgate
Okay.
here in
What
Oslo
time?
at 8:30 p.m.
8:30 p.m.
Yeah, pretty late. So I know you're an early sleeper, but you happen to be awake.
Well, yes, if I happen to be awake, I would love to. I teach quite a few classes that day, but I would love to, if I can, end my day with that class. That would be
There'll
awesome.
be candles.
Ooh, I might fall asleep though.
But I have heard people snore in my class.
Yeah, last week in my gentle class, I had 3 people fall asleep.
It's a
People are
sign of a class or
yeah. But also it's a sign of there's a lot of people that are sleep deprived in our world.
do get some sleep and meditate.
Yes.